actually think it's an inside job. I had one chambermaid say to another chambermaid, Sadie, I'll see you a little later. Have to remove a ring from a tub. Not too good. But
I know you'd know. I knew you'd have 2 or 3. You're law of average man, Hen. Our next guest tonight is one of the world's leading naturalists, and he's been accumulating material for some 30 years on a very strange subject. I imagine most people, if you say the name, are somewhat familiar with it. You may not occur to you exactly what it is, but the abominable snowman, which reportedly is a strange subhuman creature that's supposed to have existed, I guess, in the Himalayas or Himalayas, and scientists have been speculating about it for years. I think you'll find this gentleman extremely interesting and provocative. Would you welcome, please, Ivan Sanderson. Ivan.
You know Ed McMahon? Eddie?
Hello, I've had the pleasure, yes. Oh, excuse me.
What is this, mixed doubles?
I don't want to hide her. She's too pretty.
Welcome aboard, Ivan. You know, this kind of stuff fascinates me. Look things like astrology, that, which is a lot unknown, and all of this stuff, which is not, well, not really reality, and yet people seem to think it is. How long have you been working on this particular subject now? Let me ask you this. Now, the abominable snowman, or snowmen as the book is called, Legend Come to Life, is, where did that term come from, and is there such a thing?
Yes, not only such a thing, I think, I can make one point clear, that there seem to be a lot of these creatures wandering around on the surface of the Earth, in our continent, in South America, in Africa, and all over Asia, and even in Europe now, it seems. People seem to think of this as an abominable snowman. May I just get rid of that first of all? I don't think anything's abominable except a man. These things are not abominable, and they're not made of snow, and they don't live in snow.
Are they not?
But they got that name way back in 1921 when they were looking the way up to, and the man who was leading the expedition, reconnaissance expedition, he saw some creatures, something moving about on a snowfield about 20,000 feet up. And he asked the local people what they were, and they said, well, that's something. And he didn't understand the name, and he sent this name in a message down to Shillong, and there was an Indian who tapped it out on a telegraph. But he got it wrong, too, and he got down to India, where there's a wonderful Englishman by the name of Henry Newman. He's been writing a column for years. He's supposed to know everything. He more or less does. And they asked him, what does this word mean? They said, Mech Kang Mi. It wasn't at all. It should have been Meto Kangma. But still, he looked at it once and he said, well, that's Tibetan for the filthy or abominable snowman. Well, that was too much for any newspaper man, if you can imagine. The moment they got that thing over the wires, and it got stuck with this ridiculous name. But there is not just one poor wretched creature wandering around in the earth which has no children, no parents, nothing left over from privacy. It's a whole deal going on.
In your opinion, do such a thing as, well, what would you rather call it than an abominable snowman?
I call them ABSMs.
ABSMs.
Abominable snowmen. It's easier.
In your opinion, are such creatures, is that the right word?
I presume so. I think they're more human.
Wandering around?
Yeah. Well,
you really do that?
No, I'm very serious about this. It's been a joke, and if I may give a little commercial to the New Yorker, the year that I brought this book out, about every week they had a cartoon about abominable snowmen. You know, this poor looking creature showing there and saying, you should see, if you think I'm abominable, you should see my wife, and so on.
Watch out with those wife jokes, kid.
Yeah, with you around.
I met a man, there's a girl named Dorothy Wright in Chicago who brings people on to shows, So I was on with a man who came in 2 years ago from the mountains. I think he brought one of them.
Well, they're not talking about not up at the Concord, Henry. This is not those mountains, no.
Oh, that's another snowman. Anyway, this fellow, they brought him down, the furs and the whole bit. Do you know what I'm talking about?
Yes, Edmund Hillary and the great Marlin Perkins of Chicago, who had the television show with animals for many years. They went to the Himalayas, and they brought back a local village head there.
Yeah,
one of the little guys.
Village head. We were in Eli's stage delicatessen. Could this guy eat Jewish food? He didn't want to go back.
He didn't? No.
Yeah, he was a very fine character.
I lost your point here, Henny. What was
No, they brought a man back that was interpreter and could talk to these people. Is that the myth?
Well, there was an Englishman called Desmond Doig who could speak his language. This guy was a lecturer, I think, and he was the head of a village, and he had a great sense of humor. And he had this little funny hat thing, which is supposed to be mounted to the scalp of one of these creatures. And they put it on television. It's Edmund Hillary, the conqueror of Everest, and so on. They were all there.
Yeah,
and also my yeah, and he brought him in, and I rather liked him. As a matter of fact, in the studio right upstairs, he went into a little dance in honor of Sir Edmund Hillary.
I taught it.
That's what I thought, you know. That's why I was so keen to be on the show this evening, because I thought you were really going to meet the guy who got this thing organized, because it was astonishing. It was your kind of humor, too.
Abominable. Yeah.
It's not snowing out. You shouldn't talk.
Oh, I see. So you think these... So you think these people or creatures are really walk... Has anybody ever seen one? I mean, brought one in?
Yes.
There's never been one seen alive.
Yes, there has indeed. As a matter of fact, to be serious for one moment, the Russian army at the end of the last war, in 1944, it was reported to a unit of the Soviet army that a creature or a thing or a human being, at least covered with hair, with arms hanging right down to his knees, and very small eyes close together and a long pugnacious mouth and so on, had been captured, and they were rather puzzled as to what this creature might be. So they asked the local Soviet unit to send over 2 medical men. They sent a colonel of medicine and his assistant, and they interviewed all they saw this thing in a hut. They tried to keep it in a house, but it suffered so much from the heat. They had to put it in a sort of woodshed where it was cold, very cold in the winter in the Caucasus in southern Russia. And they looked at this creature and they measured it and everything else, and it didn't do anything, just sort of stood there. And finally, the Russians, the local Russian peasants, said to the officials, "What do we do with this thing?" And they said, "Well, it is more human than it is anything else. He must be a Soviet citizen or such, so you let it go." So they turned it around, I guess, and it went back into the mountains of the Caucasus. Now, that's only one case of one of these things in one area which has allegedly been seen. And I think that's pretty reliable because it's in the book. There's a fellow called Professor Leontiev, who's the head of the conservation department for the whole of that area of Russia. And he was the man who has also seen one face to face. And he went over all the reports of the army when they said they'd seen this thing. Yeah.
We're going to come back, because I got a lot of more questions about this. Did they think, well, I better do this first. We're talking with Mr. Ivan Sanderson, Annie Fargier, and Henny Youngman. We're talking about ABSMs, or abominable snowmen, people like this. What are the characteristics now? Are they tall? You didn't mention the size, the hands, or whatever they are that they have.
Johnny, actually, I think we're oversimplifying it a little bit. There are alleged to be 4 different kinds, one little pygmy one in the tropics. Let's forget about that. But the average kind, which is found in the Himalayas or Himalayas, seems to be a very bestial kind of creature, more like an ape rather than a man. And that's quite distinct from the kind that we have in North America.
In North America?
Yeah. 80 miles north of San Francisco, there's an area about 16 to 17,000 square miles of territory which has not yet been properly mapped. The federal government was mapping it when I was there in 1959. There was a triangulation map made in 1859, but nobody really knows what's in there, and it goes up and down like this, I can assure you, and there's 3 tiers of forest, one on top of another. And the foot tracks of this big kind, which appears to be about 8 foot tall, to be covered in short hair, not long hair like hair on our head if it grows, and to have rather curved hands, as described to me by a Swedish gentleman having a kind of a scoop. In other words, he measured the fingers a bit like this. They had very close, small eyes close together, and no lips at all, with a very pushed forward face, and stooped, extremely muscular on the top, rather short legs, and their arms hanging down almost to their knees.
You have some casts here now. Are those of what? What are those of? Handprints?
Well, no, I have the foot tracks, one of which I found myself in Canada, because this whole thing goes right on up the left coast, right away up through the Yukon, up to Alaska. And I found one there. I have one from California, and I have one which we ourselves found.
You mean to tell me, excuse me for interrupting, I just want to get this straight.
No.
You mean that certain creatures that haven't been categorized as pure apes,
Not apes at all, no.
that are still in the United States here, or have been or were, recently?
Right now, look, the
Oregon
Journal, one of the biggest newspapers in Oregon, has got a series of expeditions running right now. They've been out, I have the clippings. They got so interested in this thing that they mounted an expedition. They went to a place which incidentally is called Ape Canyon, and that's right next door to Mount St. Helena, which is in Oregon, in the Cascades, where a man was lost only a couple of years ago. He was
Eighth Canyon.
Eighth Canyon, isn't that strange? And that's been called that since the time of the 49ers. And they've sent an expedition up there, and they have found foot tracks similar to the plastic cast which I have here, if you'd like.
Yes, let's see these.
Why don't I show you the original abominable snowman first? Sorry, but my only blanket. This is the one from the Himalayas, or Himalayas. And this, I think, Johnny, you'll find it kind of interesting because...
We're going to do this over here?
Right there. Here's the big toes. You can see this is impressed that way. The second toe is equally big. You can see the musculature down here, and these three toes at the end, which would be our little toe and the next two, are obviously bound together by some kind of web. Most people don't know that we have only two toes bound together by a web, and that's this one and that one, as I shall endeavor to demonstrate in a moment. Now, this is the very bestial kind of creature which comes from...
Now, this is a cast made from...
It was made, the great explorer Eric Shipton, the mountaineer, he found a series of these left and right running for 4.5 miles in the snow in the Himalaya, and he had plaster with him because he'd heard about it, and he made this plaster cast, which was then redone in London, and I've got several copies of it, left and right. Now, that's that one. Now, you come to...
There's a lot of foot trouble there, I'll tell you.
There's a weird-looking thing because it's got these two toes set off on an angle.
Can I ask one question before we show the next one?
Please, yeah.
Are they sure? Now, is there any possibility that something like this could be a hoax? That somebody could have gone out in the snow and made a footprint? You know, there have been hoaxes before, like in the Piltdown Man, which, you know, people assumed...
Yeah, that was one skull, Johnny. After all, this has been going on for 2,000 or 3,000 years. It's only 1920 when the Europeans got to know about it. And they're turning up all the time. And anybody who lives up there, you go and ask them and say, sure, well, we know those things, the Metacangi, whatever they're called. And why should anybody go up into the snow where they don't live, incidentally? Because there's nothing to eat up there, so they probably live in the forests, and you only see their foot tracks in the snow when they go over on a mountain down to another thing. Okay. But it's just too much. I mean, it must be a group of Texan millionaires with more money than ever since Roman times have been doing this thing for what? I mean, you know, that's my answer. It's good enough for me.
I just wanted to know.
Here's the one we got in British Columbia on the Fraser River. Now, that's much more like a human foot, right?
Yeah.
Then the real
big human.
Yeah, but wait, look, that's a modest, probably a female, I hope. Here's the big boy from California.
California?
Yeah, about 80 miles north of San Francisco. If I may demonstrate the worthy human foot, I think it's more impressive than our faces. Johnny, if you...
Tickle him.
You see, now, I'm 6 foot tall, exactly.
Yeah.
I washed it this evening, incidentally, so it's more or less all right, I hope. But you see the really fantastic difference. Yeah.
This is the one they found in California? This is the one...
No.
Oh, excuse me, I'm sorry.
No. This is Northern California. This is
Southern California.
And you will notice that this one has 2 pads under its big toe, one here, another one there. I've only got one, I hope, as of now. But,
when was this found, Ivan?
1958. That was found by a road crew that were, his name was Crew, incidentally, Mr. Norman.
Now, in other words, as far as California is concerned, or North America, they have not seen the creature. They have only actually found footprints of it.
They have seen the creatures.
Well, they have seen them.
I have it in the book there in the back. I give a list, simply because there's so many listings, of about 20 cases of people who allege they have seen them. Now, of course, we weren't there. A movie camera running. It's usually at night. But they were reliable citizens, 2 doctors on one occasion who were driving to an emergency. And they were driving along a road, and they said they saw what they thought was somebody standing at the side wanting a lift. And they slowed down, and then they saw... it was carrying that big...
Can you imagine stopping your car to pick up one of the... Sorry, I'm only going to Frisco.
It's strange, Johnny, that right in our own country here, there is space still for unknown things.
I didn't realize that there was that much unexplored space in the United States. I realize Mexico is largely unexplored.
Vast areas, in Canada, of course, as well, and you have reports from there. But right in our own country, it's going a little too far. But
it's fascinating.
There you are.
Ivan, outside of the one creature you said that had been seen in the Himalayas, or in Russia, have any more been captured at all?
One was supposed to have been captured in 1848 on the Fraser River in Canada. It was on the railway line. They just finished the main east to west railroad to Canada. And the train was going along with all the regular crew and also some officials. and they saw this thing sitting up on a ledge. And they went after it, and it got cornered. And somebody, in those days, they weren't quite as nice as we are today, and he threw a rock at it, conked it on the head, and it fell down on the railway line, and they caught it and took it down to a little place called Yale. I visited that place and talked to people there, and in 1848, you didn't have circuses running around losing chimpanzees in North America. They just didn't have them. And this was covered with long black hair, had very long arms, was immense strength in its arms. It did not speak any known language. But like all these things, there the story ends. It was put in charge of a doctor. It was reported on to the British authorities, who were then, you know, Canada was still part of the British Empire, and it was also reported in the press. And then suddenly there's a dead end, because the particular newspaper went out of print, and the morgue of that newspaper was moved to another town, and I went there to try and find it, but it's one of those things that's gone in 100 years.
I imagine most people are, you know, they get, are suspicious, and they tend to dismiss this, you know, as just myth. And yet, we were talking before the show tonight, and I was familiar with this particular happening in which they thought this fish, I believe it's pronounced the coelacanth.
Yeah.
They thought it was extinct for 70, you have it here in the book, for 70 million years. And in just the last couple of years, they've dredged up 3 or 4 of them, haven't they?
Yeah, they got 7 of them now.
And it's supposed to have been extinct for 70 million years. So they found out that that is still...
And it's not just the fish, Johnny, because it's a whole group of fishes from which, as a matter of fact, we probably maybe ultimately descended. If you
short,
believe.
stubby little legs.
They had little legs instead of just fins, and then the fins on the end, and they were the kind of creature which may have first come out of the water onto land, you see? And they thought this whole group of creatures was totally extinct for 70 million years. And then they dredge up a live one. It's 5 foot long. He's got it's bright blue. He's got a yellow eye about this size, and and then they go back to the islands off the south coast of South Africa, and they then find that the local native peoples have been eating these things all along.
Oh, these Sanderson.
They don't like them very much, but they're a bit oily, and they're sort of big trash fish, and we eat them all the time. And here, every scientist in the world was going like this. And when it first came out, incidentally, and which is even worse, they said, no, it's a lie. You can't have something. We know that this has been extinct for 70 million years. Now they've got 7 of them, and they've had to sort of do a little...
You have to reverse. So you can't take anything really for granted.
No, you cannot. You cannot.
I have another little question I'm going to ask you, but before I do, I want to get a number here. We've had Indian Summer planned on this show for I don't know how long. Since Indian Summer, and since it's starting to snow back here, we thought it might be a nice time to do a late, because it's such a lovely number, Skitch and a late Indian Summer. We're back. Ivan, we're going to have to continue this discussion sometime. We had more things that we can... This is fascinating stuff, and I want to thank you so much for being here. It's amazing to think that that's walking around in this. We were supposed to have a kendo demonstration tonight, an ancient Japanese sport of with bamboo rods, and they will be back with us soon. You know, when they do get on, they are going to beat me to death with those things, but they will be on soon. Tomorrow night we have Dawn Nickerson. Arnold Palmer will be with us. The Willis sisters, and we have a surprise guest tomorrow. I won't tell you who it is, but it's a big star, and we'll have a lot of fun tomorrow night. Eddie, you go to Tucson at a place called the Skyway, is that true?
Sky Room, yeah.
Sky
Tomorrow
Room.
I open for 2 weeks, then I go to Phoenix 2 weeks. Hot Leonard's, now available.
Then you're available after that.
Pretty
Ivan,
busy.
Annie, thank you. Happy driving. Eddie, Ed, good night. We'll see you tomorrow with Dawn, Arnold, and the Willis sisters.